Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. My name is Brett DiMarzo. I am the Director of Graduate Enrollment Digital Strategy at Boston College in Boston, Massachusetts. And I sit on several committees in NAGAP, on the Leadership, Cultivation and Elections Committee and the Education Committee. And I'm really excited to be able to host this leadership reception again. We have a wonderful panel that has joined us today to talk about their experience as a leader in NAGAP and kind of how they got to be a leader in NAGAP and what their journey was like. And we're just really excited to be able to share that with you. Obviously, we have been doing these leadership receptions, at least a few times a year, which is great. And it's really a chance for us to again, share our experiences as leaders in NAGAP, but also answer any questions that you all might have. I believe that all of you at one point or another have kind of raised your hand and said that you have been interested in becoming a leader or seeking a leadership role within NAGAP in one way or another. And so that's kind of the mission of these leadership receptions, is to be able to provide that opportunity for you to hear from people who have roles within the association, whether that's on the chapter level or on one of the committees or as a member of the board. So we're really excited to have you here and looking forward to sharing that information. I have a great panel today with me, and I'm going to be asking them some questions to kind of start us off. But if you have any questions yourself about, either somebody's experience or you have a question about one of the leadership opportunities within NAGAP, either on the national level or with one of the chapters, I welcome you to ask them. You can put them in the chat, or there'll be some time at the end of the presentation. We'll leave probably about 10 minutes or so to have you all give or ask any questions that you might have as well. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do was just let all the panelists introduce themselves, and they're going to share who they are and where they're from, and what their or how long they've been a member of NAGAP. So we'll start with Keith. Keith, if you want to introduce yourself to the group.
Sure. Thanks, Brett. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keith Ramsdell, and I'm Vice President for Enrollment Management and Marketing at Ashland University in Ashland, Ohio, about an hour south of Cleveland. I'm excited that you're all here today exploring more about what leadership might look like in NAGAP. I've been involved in NAGAP for about 16 years now, and I'm currently serving as immediate past president of the association. And I currently also oversee and chair the Leadership, Cultivation and Elections Committee, as well as the External Relations and Partnerships Committee, which helps essentially build bridges between NAGAP and other peer associations and vendor partners. And that's where a lot of your data and white papers and original research in the GEM space is coming from, is out of that relationship. So I'm happy to share any of my past experiences with you during this time together. But again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Keith. So Dana, would you mind introducing yourself? I'm just kind of going from left to right here on my screen. So Dana, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you bet. And I apologize for the video quality here. It's I work for a state institution, so many of you might know what budgets are like with that kind of thing. Anyway, I'm Dana Mordecai. I work at the University of North Texas. We're about 45 minutes north of Dallas and Fort Worth. And I'm the Assistant Director for Graduate Recruitment. And I've been a part of NAGAP for, it's probably 13, 14 years, something like that. So it feels like a very long time when you start talking about the aught decade. When you started with something, it feels like a long time ago. So I'm excited to be part of the panel and looking forward to hearing some of your questions.
Thanks, Dana. And last but certainly not least, Amanda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Amanda Ostrico. I'm the Assistant Vice Provost and Director of Graduate Enrollment Management at the University of Kansas. Hopefully my Wi-Fi is good. I'm in a hotel room in Cincinnati right now. I do have a hotspot, so my fingers crossed that is much better than the hotel Wi-Fi. Right now, I am the chair of NAGAP's Professional Development Committee. And prior to that, I'd served on the research committee. I had also served on the NAGAP chapter board pretty early on in its creation. And I've been involved with NAGAP probably also about 13 or 14 years. I think I went to my first conference in 2007 and then joined shortly after that. And then just as far as overall my professional experience goes, I've always been in graduate enrollment management or somehow supporting graduate programs in my career, and I've been at KU almost 19 years now.
Great, thanks, Amanda. And I just want to give an acknowledgement to one of our panelists that unfortunately just seems to not be able to join us, but we're going to have Dr. John Smith as well, who's going to be able to join us. Hopefully he'll be able to join us. He might be just tied up a little bit, so but hopefully he'll be able to join us and provide some insight as well. So, but I'll go ahead and get started. So I have a couple of questions that I wanted to kind of throw out to the panelists, and we'll have Keith start with this one. I think we all kind of have talked a little bit about kind of what how we're kind of currently involved in a leadership way with NAGAP, and I'm sure everybody who is joining us today is kind of on that path and interested to see how to become more involved in a leadership role. So I wanted to have you share with us, how did you initially get involved in a leadership role with NAGAP, Keith, and what was the initiator for you to get involved specifically in a leadership role within the association?
Sure, Brett. Well, for me, I think, when I attended my first NAGAP annual conference, or now referred to as Summit, this was in Florida. We were in Orlando in, 2006, I think was my first conference. And my goal there was not necessarily to pursue a leadership position, but it was just to network. I mean, for a lot of you, if you've been to one of our events in the past, you know that while there's some great educational content, really the biggest value that I've picked up on is how do you connect with your colleagues from around the country and around the world, so that when you have an issue, when you have questions or whatever it is, you have somebody to call. And so I raised my hand at the first conference and I said, what can I do? How can you use me, plug me in? I showed up early and stuffed packets and, just met people and said, point me in the right direction. And I just kind of went from there. And so I met various people who were involved in committees. And so the first committee that I served on for a term was the Professional Development Committee that Amanda now chairs. And that was a great opportunity for me to meet additional people who were on the board, but in particular, just to serve and just give of my time. That was the big thing. And then from there, I was asked to serve on the board as chair of that committee, as chair of the Professional Development Committee. Then just kind of went from there. But honestly, the biggest thing was just the networking and the opportunity to give back. And so, I went from serving in that capacity to running for office and serving as vice president and subsequently president. And I also chaired the bylaws revision committee. I've actually done that a couple of times now. So if you're interested in bylaws, I know it sounds like a really cool thing to do. Ask me, because I'm doing it actually now for the third time in the last 10 years. So. But, I guess the big thing, and Brett, I know that we talked about this, I think at every single one of these receptions that we do. The big question is, how much time does it take? And I guess the thing that I like to respond to in that regard is, it takes as much time as you're willing to give. You know, if it's 15 minutes a week, if it's 30 minutes a week, if it's a couple hours a month, you know, everything that you can contribute is important, not just for you to connect to the association, but it's important for the association and for the other members that we serve. And so you just kind of grow it from there. And pretty soon it's just a part of my routine. I think that's true for most members of the board and most members that serve on committees, that we're all crazy busy, right? Especially with COVID still in our backyards, we are all crazy busy. And so it really is just a matter of saying, well, what can I contribute? What can I give back to my profession? And what can I contribute to, you know, building on my own professional resume? And you give what you can give. And that's what I've learned over the years, is that, you know, I'll do what I can do. And that has to be enough, and that's okay. And that, you know, that brings me to where I am now.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. Dana, you know what, I know you and I met each other through the work that we were doing kind of for our individual chapters. So was that kind of how you initially became involved in kind of a leadership role within the association?
Yeah, it actually, that was exactly how it started. But even prior to that, it was very similar to Keith's experience in attending one of the annual meetings with the organization and realizing that there was a group that I could fit into, and that had some of the same issues as I did, and people that I wanted to learn from. And when I found out about the Texas chapter, and it was just forming as I was kind of entering this kind of phase of exploring how to get involved and how to engage and network with people. And it seemed just like the perfect opportunity to really look at a smaller group of individuals who would have very similar, you know, challenges. Brett, you being in the Northeast and me being in Texas, we've got different problems, right? And when I looked at being a part of this group that really could focus on our unique differences, and you know, part of it was we would see each other on the road if we were out recruiting, and that helped to build some of that camaraderie. And so leading that particular group of people through the chapter leadership really just became something that I was very passionate about, and taking this kind of very young chapter to another level and really kind of formalizing things within that organization and growing it as well was something that I felt really, really proud of and connected to very deeply. And so as I moved through, I started out as the annual conference for the chapter. I started out as chair of that, and you know, just said, I know how to run an event, I can do that. And so then it led into vice president, and then into president of the chapter. And my passion is chapters of NAGAP, and really, you know, how those can really just fill in so much need that our members have, and you know, is able to then translate all of that experience to being chapters chair on the NAGAP board, and really bringing that experience, I think, helps to, you know, to really help the organization look at these different components of how our members you know, interact with each other, and the types of activities that they're doing, whether it's a chapter, you know, webinar, or it's a happy hour, or they're meeting people at a recruitment event. And so, you know, how we can intertwine those things has really made a difference. But and I think, you know, Keith gave some really great tips for people who are thinking about this. And one of the things I might want to just say about it is that I felt like I had a severe case of imposter syndrome at every stage of those kind of transition points, whether it was when I first met anybody in the gym world, or then felt like, oh, could I really run an actual event for this organization? And then so on and so forth. And still today, it's still a part of, me, thinking, golly, can I really do this? I don't know. But it's been exciting to have this group of people that really then wrap their arms around you and say, absolutely, you can do this. If you've got the interest and the commitment to it, then you absolutely have something to contribute. So that's it.
Great, thanks, Dana. And you're not an imposter. You do a great job, Dana. So
Not anymore, I guess.
no, not ever, trust me. Amanda, you want to share a little bit about kind of what got you initially started? And I know you on some of the previous receptions we've done, I know you and Keith have highlighted the fact of some of the following that happens sometimes within NAGAP in terms of people going from one role and then giving it up to somebody else and then working with them again on a committee. So do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, I was going to say actually both what Keith and Dana shared, I can kind of combine to my story. Other than this, so I did start out initially, besides attending a conference, which my first conference was also in Orlando, besides attending a conference and being encouraged, I should actually take a step back and say, the associate dean that I worked for, so I worked for about 10 years initially when I started at KU in the School of Engineering. And my associate dean was an incredible supervisor, incredibly supportive. Certainly, I always tell people I won like the best ever First Boss Award when it comes to just having someone who really wanted to develop someone as an individual and really help them to have a career and kind of see a path and where they were going. And so he had actually in his recruitment travels run into someone who was at Iowa State University, Nancy Knight, who some people might know. And when we had come upon NAGAP as an organization, I think through a flyer or something advertising the conference, he had reached out to her to see if she had heard of NAGAP and had any advice. Unfortunately, she was on the board at that point, and so she could really tell us about NAGAP, my coworker and I, and encourage us to at least attend the conference. So I guess kind of going back to that networking and kind of people that you end up connected with, it's always kind of fascinating to me kind of how everything kind of connects together. So, certainly at conferences, I also would volunteer when I had a chance and, presented, different sessions. But then after a couple of years, I saw the call for volunteers and reached out to apply to serve on the research committee. So that was really kind of my first more formal experience with NAGAP, was serving on the research committee, which I really enjoyed. My educational background is also in higher education, and I really liked the research aspect of that. And so it was a really great fit for me professionally, but then also personally with the educational pursuits that I was having at the time. And so then after serving on the research committee, it was shortly after that that the Midwestern Association of Graduate Admission Professionals, so MAGAP, formed. And I was fortunate to also at the annual conference, I attended the kind of an information session that had been put together to see if we wanted to create a chapter. And so I was part of that initial conversation, and then wasn't on that very first board, but then when they had some movement on the board, was invited to take over the treasurer position at that time on the board. So that was really then my first kind of board experience. I also volunteered, I think, for one of the first mentor programs. And that was really great to have that kind of formal experience as in that role, and certainly also got to meet more people doing that. And then when the call came out for volunteers, and I think it was 2014 when I applied to be on the professional development committee. And I can say that also aligned well with what I was doing at my own institution at KU, professional development has always been really important to me, both to get as a professional, but then also to give back, because I have gotten so much over the years from colleagues and from mentors who aren't necessarily part of like the GEM space, but faculty and others who have guided me over the years. And so professional development is always something that I'm probably I shouldn't say now, but previously was almost always going to volunteer to do. And so it was a really great fit that I was able to join Keith when he chaired that committee. So that's kind of following. That's kind of when I more formally started to follow Keith's path of serving on the professional development committee. And then when he moved off to do some other things in his leadership capacities, I stayed on the committee. And then when Katie Bisak, who was chairing that committee, when Keith recruited her to be the marketing chair, then I took over as chair of the professional development committee. So kind of a little bit of both Keith and Dana's path there.
Very nice. Yeah, everything is connected, as they say. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, and I know all of you kind of shared a little bit of this kind of question already, but if was there, and this kind of goes to anybody, but did any of you have anything specifically that motivated you for seeking out that leadership role? So I'll give you an example. I know you kind of a lot of you talked about it already, but for me, it was really people who knew me, and once I started to kind of meet other colleagues at some of these events like the summit and things like that, it was actually conversations that I actually had with my fellow kind of GEM professionals who kind of encouraged me to become involved in a leadership role on the New England chapter. So whether it was Ariana, for any of you know who Ariana is, and kind of her encouragement for me to kind of seek out that role. So did any of you also have that type of thing? Was it, did you have a mentor within the profession that kind of sparked you to do that, or something like that? Or was it just your own research? Was there something in particular that drove you?
Well, Brett, for me, I'll just say, I think I was seeking out the opportunity to network, like I already said. But once I started expressing interest in getting more actively involved in the association, that's when I met Joanne Canyon Heller, who was, she is a past president of NAGAP, and she was also the director of graduate enrollment at Roosevelt University in Chicago. And she was a great mentor and friend to a lot of us. And she just had a knack and a drive, if you will, to seek out those who could help provide leadership for the association and move the association forward. And so she was a motivator for sure. And when she encouraged me to step into even the volunteer role that I started out in, I was like, if she believes in me, then I think I can do it. And that was kind of the first step.
And I think for me, it's about giving back to an organization that I think exists solely to help me, right, in my job. And so with some of my other activities that I do, I spend a lot of time on PTA boards and booster clubs with my kids, and have a really good understanding that with a volunteer-driven organization, it doesn't happen without the hands getting in there to actually do the work. And I have the ability, I think, and the passion to help, move that organization forward, like Keith just said. But it was really my desire to be able to give back and actually, like I said, roll up the sleeves and get some things done.
Great. So I think one of the nice things about what we do as an association is the work that we do, the events that we have, the opportunities to network and or do professional development activities, whether it's the annual summit or one of the PDI workshops, or being involved in the mentorship program or the leadership academy, whatever the case may be. I think an association like NAGAP has the ability to not only give us an opportunity to give back, like you were saying, Dana, but also to be able to get some benefit from that, individually for our own kind of professional development and leadership development, as well as things that we can use on our campuses and things like that. So I'm curious, and Dana, you can start with this, but I'm just curious if you could kind of share how your involvement in your roles within NAGAP and whether on the chapter level or the committee level, how have those roles benefited you professionally and personally?
Well, I think that, a lot of folks look at an organization like this to network, and certainly there is a lot of movement of jobs perhaps, but I think for me personally, the benefit has been to grab a whole bunch of really good ideas out there that I can implement as soon as I hear them almost. And I am not a smart man, as Forrest Gump likes to say, but I can certainly, smart enough to know that there is a lot of experts, and to be able to take that information to me personally kind of helps shore up where I think maybe I don't have as much information or as much knowledge about something. And for me, that's really what I've taken from the organization to help me be better at my job, right? And kind of like Amanda, I've been only in graduate enrollment management, and pretty much it feels like the same job over many, many years, but I still love it. And I really crave the things that NAGAP can provide to help me continually to improve in that. Even if I haven't actually changed jobs because of this, I believe that my work has really improved with that. So that's kind of my story.
Thank you, Dana. Amanda, from your perspective, how does having not only being involved in NAGAP and the things that the association offers to members, but also those roles that you've had and the role that you currently have in a leadership position, how has that helped you grow professionally and personally?
I would certainly echo what Dana has said as far as being able to have, a really quick and great network to go to either, get ideas, to try to implement a new strategy or, something that we're working on, or if we have an issue or a problem, to say like, is this just us, or, who else is seeing this, what trends are out there. So that is incredibly helpful to have, a variety of institutions, whether it's public or private or, smaller or specific, professional schools. Like there are a lot of different ways I can get that information, and, then either share best practices with, my leadership or other individuals at my institution, or say like, well, actually, we're seeing this issue, but so is everyone else. And so, we don't like it. Like, this is, something we're all going to have to deal with. But besides that, I would say also really specifically back when I started in our graduate studies office. So I had mentioned I initially started in our School of Engineering. And then after that, I moved over to our graduate studies office as the director of graduate enrollment. And as part of my interview process, they had you share some sort of writing sample or publication that you had produced, and I was able to share something I had written for NAGAP publication or perspectives, and so that was, a very direct tie, to that entire interview process, which unfortunately I was appointed to that role. So, there are some kind of broader things I could talk about, but also like really specific things that I can point to that have certainly helped me and, personally, in my professional career. And then I would also say personally, I mean, that's a group that, I've gained some really great, long-term friends, over the years with, the different interactions I've had, whether, with my committee or with board members or part of whatever volunteer experience, I might be having. So both professionally and personally, it's been a really great organization.
Great, thanks, Amanda. And Keith, from your perspective, especially with the roles that you've had and specifically kind of being president of the association, are there things that you have learned and gained from having the roles within the association that kind of have helped you in, personally and professionally as well, and especially where, in your role, both as a former, immediate past president of NAGAP, but then also your current role as a VP, are there things that you've gained from your experiences in NAGAP that you feel have helped you get to the point at which you are now professionally and personally?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Brett. And I think twofold, as you ask the question, there's two thoughts that come to mind. One is, I know that my leadership involvement in NAGAP is what led to my being hired in my previous position at Bowling Green State University. I was hired by a dean who was familiar with NAGAP and was very clear with me after I was hired that it was my leadership, my network, and my years of longevity in NAGAP. That's the reason he hired me. He made that very clear to me because they needed help. And whether I knew the answer or not was less significant than the fact that I had a network where I could find the answers. And that's how I sold myself in the interview process, was that I don't always have the answers. None of us do, but having the network and the people to go to when you do find yourself in a difficult or challenging situation, that's really critical. And he totally agreed with that. As far as moving from an assistant dean and director position into a VP position, I can't necessarily say that I was hired because of my experience with NAGAP, but what I will tell you, Brett, is that I would not have trusted my own leadership abilities if I hadn't served as president of NAGAP. And that maybe sounds a little extreme, but I've used the term that Dana used. I've struggled with the imposter syndrome in my own leadership several times. And when I came here to interview for this position, I felt that I was qualified for the VP position, not because of my previous work experience, but because of my previous leadership experience through NAGAP. And again, the network that I had built, that's essentially what gave me the confidence to even apply for an executive level role. And it's what continues to give me the confidence that I need to be successful in this role. And so, absolutely, again, I think that the stepping stones to serve in an executive position, even within a volunteer organization, like I would not have felt confident serving as president without serving first on the board and serving as vice president. But for me professionally, those were all stepping stones to serving an executive position in my career.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And what I would say is what's been really interesting for me, I'll just share a personal anecdote because I think my role that I'm currently in at BC is I'm relatively new in this role. And one of the things that I've quickly learned about the role that I have at BC is the need to be able to really collaborate with a whole bunch of teams. And for my specific role at BC, it's working with the admissions and marketing teams within the 8 graduate and professional schools that we have at BC. And what's been great about that, and what's been very helpful in getting very acclimated to that new role very quickly, is the fact that a lot of those collaboration skills I think I've learned through my networking and through the involvement that I've had in different leadership roles within NAGAP, because that's, it's part and parcel for that, collaborating with your colleagues and trying to figure out what solutions are for different problems and challenges, and being able to brainstorm what those ideas are. So that's, I'll just share that personal anecdote for me and how it's helped me. So I wanted to finish up the questions that I have with just kind of one final question for each of you, and then I'd love to open it up and see if anybody else has any questions. But just want to provide each of you an opportunity to kind of share just what some last kind of parting advice would be to any of the people who are in our audience today who, have obviously joined us tonight because they're interested in kind of seeking out what types of leadership opportunities there are, and have raised their hand and said, yes, I'm interested, I want to learn more. So Amanda, we'll start with you. What's your kind of advice for everybody here tonight to figure out what the next step is, and what should they be doing to kind of get to that leadership role or that opportunity?
I mean, we've talked about, I think between Keith and Dana, we've talked about, and you, Brett, as well, I think we've talked about a number of them of, at least within NAGAP of, volunteering, when you're able to go to an event, volunteer whatever time you're able to, if you are able to submit information and apply when that call for volunteers comes out for different committees, certainly doing that. I would say related to that, also reaching out to those committee chairs to learn more information and see if there are other ways to help out to support the committee, even if perhaps there aren't positions open on that committee. Getting involved in chapters, I think all of us have been involved. I think most individuals who end up in a leadership role in NAGAP have had some sort of chapter involvement. And I would say, but besides those very specific pieces, whenever you are doing something with NAGAP, and this might sound kind of basic, but making sure that you are, taking the time to introduce yourself to those who are around you, and, having those casual conversations that I miss so much in the virtual world. I'm very excited tomorrow I get to do for the first time in a couple of years. Like those often end up leading to so many places you would never realize are going to, get you down some sort of path. And then I'd say your own institution also. So not necessarily just at NAGAP, but in your own institution, find those types of volunteer roles that you see can help you get to where you want to be. Even if you don't quite know, like I can say, I wouldn't have told you this was the job I wanted, that I thought I would be in even 10 years ago. I mean, and so it's, all those things, like we said, that kind of build upon each other that get you there. And so there are certainly at a lot of institutions ways that you can be intentional about volunteering your time to get you where you want to go. I wouldn't say just volunteer for anything, because we don't have the time for that. So that is the one thing I do try to tell people, is to be intentional and make that volunteer experience meaningful, and don't just sign up just for something to get a volunteer experience if that's not really what you think you want.
Thanks, Amanda. And yes, if everybody saw the chat, Jeremiah just reminds us that there will be coming out later this week, call for volunteers with seeking folks with experience and or interest in working on developing our new website and to cultivate virtual community engagement on the exchange. So thank you, Jeremiah, for pointing that out. Keith, same question. Last kind of, some words of advice for our audience today in terms of, they've raised their hands, they're interested. Kind of what are some of those next steps that you think are going to be helpful for them to be able to seek out a role?
Yeah, and Brett, I'm going to go back to what I said before. If you're looking for ways to get involved, if you're looking for leadership opportunities, really, the biggest thing to do is, if you haven't served on a committee yet, what Jeremiah is suggesting here, as far as the committees that have openings, say say yes. If that's an area of interest, say yes, I'm willing to do that. Committee work, I think all of us between chapters and committees, that's the way to step into, kind of those leadership roles. And while serving on a committee, you might not think, oh, well, that's a leadership role. Well, there are only so many committees at the national level. There's only so many committees at the state level or at the regional, the chapter level. But to say, I'm willing to do what I can do and I'm willing to serve the way that I can serve, that is a step into leadership if you're not already doing that. And then the other thing, and I'm just going to repeat what I already said, is don't think that a little bit of time is not significant. A little bit of time is significant. I mean, we've heard this time and time again, whether or not you're giving financially to United Way or your church or whatever it is, the message is consistent. Whatever you can give is significant, and volunteer work is no different. Whatever you can give is significant. It will be significant to you, and it will be significant to the organization, and it will be significant to the GEM community. It's all valuable and it's all appreciated.
Well said, Keith. And Dana, from your perspective, whether looking at the National Association or the chapters, what's some words of advice you have?
Yeah, I think it's really to just not even think about it, right? Just want to jump in. And likely you probably will have some questions. Maybe it's about how do I even approach this person? Or, I think I might want to submit a presentation, proposal. How do I get started with that? What's it like to be on the committee? It's literally sending an email to someone. It's contacting, myself or anybody really, that I can see all of these faces, would be happy to, walk through what's that next step? What does this really look like to move from, a committee to the national board? Or, what would it be like to help organize a chapter event? All of those things we can help you walk through, but it's really just jumping in, saying, yes, I'm going to do it.
Well said. Yeah. And I would echo with what all the panelists have said. And, I think that's been, that's been a point of enjoyment in terms of my career is being able to be part of an organization like this and dedicate whatever time that I have to be able to do it. I'm sure some people are getting tired of seeing my face with the amount of things that I'm involved in, but I really, I think what's nice about what we do as an organization, and I think you could actually probably expand this to most people who work in higher education and GEM and different parts of a college or university, but there is true passion for what we do, not only for what we do and the students that we work with, but I think working as part of this industry, this field, and working with each other as professionals and as colleagues, I think that's rare. When you look at different industries out there and different jobs that people have, I certainly experienced, didn't experience what we have in higher ed and what we have in NAGAP in the corporate world and my experience that I've had. So this is just, this is, as we've said before, this is our way of kind of giving back and having a hand in really making our field better and what it is today. So hopefully you all feel that way as well. I'm sure you do, or else you wouldn't be working in this field, because we don't do it for the pay. So wonderful. So thank you, panelists. Now I just wanted to open it up. If you all have any questions for any of our panelists about either their experience or, again, about what is that next step, or if you have questions about either, what it is to serve on as an executive board member or as part of a committee or as part of a chapter, please feel free. You can unmute yourself and ask away. But we have, all this great experience up here, ready and willing to take your questions. I'm sure Jeremiah would even chime in with an answer if he wanted. There you go. Does anybody have any questions for any of our panelists? It's okay if you don't. I'm not trying to pull teeth here, but no, that's okay. I mean, what's nice is that I know, I see a number of you are involved in different things. So that's always nice. And it's always nice to see, the people who have done things like volunteer or are sitting on chapters or committees. And, what's nice about being able to offer these receptions is to just give that opportunity to kind of ask those types of questions. So feel free. If not, that's okay. I know it's late afternoon. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate it. As Dana said, I think what I want you to leave with today is feel whatever questions that you have, even if it's, what's it like to be in this role or be involved in this activity, please reach out to Keith, myself, Dana, Amanda, Jeremiah. Please just let us know any questions that you have about, any of the opportunities that NAGAP has. Our association is as strong as its members. And, the work that we do as an association is run on us, our members. And so I love the fact that you all are interested and want to be involved and seek those roles. So however we can help you get to that point, please let us know. Oh, thank you, Jeremiah, for putting your email in there. Thank you. Yes. I'll put mine in as well in case. Now that I can promote my new BC email address. You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon. And I hope the rest of the fall semester goes well for everybody.
Thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.